Welcome. It has just gone 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Thursday the 18th of May, and you are watching episode 86 of Regional Wrap. Regional Wrap providing an insight on the issues affecting regional Australia and giving a voice to regional residents. My name is Bill Bates, and joining me on this episode, Hydrogen, the Hydrogen Pathway, is my guest, Sam Mohan, Managing Director of Frontier Energy. Sam is an accomplished energy executive with over 20 years' experience in the energy and utilities industries. His experience spans many facets of the industry, from design and construction through to strategic asset management, regulation policy, commercial and innovation. Sam's previous senior management positions include Global Head of Hydrogen for the Ep86 Group, a subsidiary of Subsea 7, where he developed and led the company's overall hydrogen strategy. In this role, he also conceptualized the company's largest hydrogen project, Project Mercury. Prior to Ep86 Group, Sam spent 6 years at ATCO, where he was instrumental in the development of the company's hydrogen strategy, including the conceptualization, design and construction of Australia's first ever hydrogen microgrid, the Clean Energy Innovation Hub. Sam holds a Masters of Science in Mechanical Engineering from the University of Portsmouth and an MBA from the Australian Business Institute. Welcome, Sam.
Wonderful to be here, Bill. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. It's been an interesting journey to get you on and someone to talk about hydrogen. I have tried to talk to a number of other companies and that, but they're fairly complex in their setups. And the thing that attracted me to Frontier, one, I did know Mike Young, who was there before, but also you've got a standalone project down at Bristol Springs. And that's fairly unique because most of the hydrogen projects we hear, at least on this side of the country, they're all intertwined with what they call energy hubs. So you've got people who are providing the renewables. Another group is users of the electricity and also potentially users of hydrogen. You've got people who are vying to actually produce the hydrogen. And then on the side of that, you've got people who are involved in battery manufacturing and other energy requirements. So can you tell us why you seem to be so unique in just having this standalone and fully sort of owner-operated, if I could say that, project?
Yeah, it's no trouble at all, Bill. So just by way of introduction, Frontier Energy is an ASX-listed, public-listed company. We listed about just over 12 months now on the Australian Stock Exchange, and our flagship project is the Bristol Springs Renewable Hydrogen Project. And essentially what the project is as part of stage one is to construct a 114 megawatt solar farm and a minimum size electrolyzer of 36 megawatts. The 36 megawatt electrolyzer will produce about 4.9 million kilograms of green hydrogen. Now, to answer your question, what makes us quite unique and standalone is our site is pretty much blessed with critical infrastructure. So it's surrounded by critical infrastructure, world-class infrastructure. Now, that includes the land itself. The land is fantastic land for solar projects. It's very flat land. It's got silica soils. It's quite degraded farming land, or farming land. But importantly, running right next door to the land is infrastructure such as the electricity grid, the gas pipeline, as well as water infrastructure. And it's right in the heart of hard-to-abate sectors. So essentially, when you put all those things together with some really good engineering and some very innovative business model and thinking, our company becomes a forerunner. It's actually one of the most mature hydrogen projects, in my view, around the country.
Well, that's really surprising because in regards to you've got this keen focus of what you're doing, whereas I was trying to speak to the people engaged in Murchison hydrogen some years ago, and it's like it was just at that time it was nothing more than a drawing on a napkin sort of type thing, but they'd already had a lot of interest and support from the government. And then from being a sort of an Australian-owned entity with local participators, it was quickly taken over by an international group. And then it's still at the stage where they're likely to make a decision on the program by 2025. And if the decision is yes, well, then they might start somewhere in the 5 years after that. So it seems like that's not a very sort of, well, what would you say, to attract enthusiasm from the public when you get something tied up. Whereas your project, you obviously had a start date, you're progressing, and things are happening. Whereas other things that were on a much grander scale, supposedly, just haven't gone past the wet napkin stage.
That's a really good and interesting point as well, Bill. In my view, energy transition is extremely difficult. It's very difficult. And the most difficult part about energy transition is matching supply with demand. Now, as you can appreciate, the demand for hydrogen, it's very immature. The demand for hydrogen is set to grow, and there's multiple sectors that hydrogen is a fantastic energy vector to enable multiple sectors to fuel switch. But coming back to the point around matching supply and demand, you have to deploy, in my view, the right technology at the right time and at the right scale. So from our studies that we've done, and bearing in mind that we've got land that already has development approvals in place for the solar farm, it already has connections onto the grid, etc. And from our studies, we've deduced that the minimum size electrolyzer to deploy is a 36 megawatt electrolyzer. But fundamentally, our project is actually a large-scale project. It's a project that has significant expansion capability up to well over a gigawatt. And when you actually consider these large gigawatt scale projects, especially if they don't have infrastructure such as water, electricity, you've got significant amount of capital to outlay to build desalination plants, for example, to supply water to the project. You need to build out transmission cables, switch yards, etc., which again, we don't have to do that because we've got that existing infrastructure and secured connections onto them. And then equally important is how do you actually get the product from where you are producing it to where it needs to be consumed? Now, our project has two things. It has the gas pipeline within the vicinity. And just this week, we've announced a collaboration agreement with the Dampier to Bunbury natural gas pipeline owner operator, which is AGIG. And that pipeline is already, it's the section that we are connecting onto, or will potentially connect onto, is immediately ready for hydrogen injection. Now, what that gives us is a very unique opportunity to transport the molecules from where it's being produced in Bristol Springs to these hard-to-abate sectors. Hard-to-abate sectors, alumina refineries, lithium processing plants, the Kemerton Strategic Industrial Estate, etc. And then if we had to provide the renewable energy in the form of an electron, which energy is currently traded at very, very freely at the moment, we've got a connection onto the Southwest Interconnected System that enables us to do that. So this is one of the reasons why Frontier Energy has been so successful in developing its project, taking it to a point where we can now engage the market to secure these fundamental offtake so that we can move into construction. Now, a number of large projects would require significant design, significant amount of capital. They need to partner, etc., to get up to those large scales and build the infrastructure around it in order to commercialize the product. Will these projects get up? In my view, yes, they will. Will it get up in the short term? Probably not. It's probably more a mid to long term opportunity. But it is projects like Frontier Energy's projects that will lower these thresholds for these future projects to get up, because there'll be a significant amount of workforce skilling, maturity, the learning curve, also providing that confidence on the demand side for companies to fuel switch so you can get a steady state of hydrogen. So I hope that gives you an idea,
Yeah.
Bill.
Do you think that some ways these sort of big fanfare projects that get a lot of publicity initially, talking about billions of dollars of expenditure and thousands of jobs, and and it's somewhat in the distance. Do you think, and again, like with Twiggy Forrest, coming over to Gladstone and saying he's got to build hundreds of electrolyzers, and do you think that is less than helpful for the industry when people blow up all these big expectations and then they sort of just filter off into the distance?
It's definitely a challenge. It's very important, obviously, to educate the industry and to demonstrate what's possible. And in order to develop good policy and provide those policy, or provide some level of certainty and a roadmap so that policy can be wrapped around it, I think the vision and the large scale is a requirement. Certainly, when you think about the vast opportunity that Australia has to supply large volumes of hydrogen into the Asian markets as we do LNG, these large-scale projects are very important. And with these large-scale projects, there's a significant amount of jobs that will be created and great for economic prosperity. However, the challenge with the large-scale projects is it can somewhat distract from us building commercial-scale projects that can be built here and now. And what's important, the role of governments is actually to really start to understand the projects. I'm an engineer, Bill, so when I look at things, I look at the things from three pillars. I look at it from constructability, I look at it from a consentability and an investability perspective. So when I'm looking at a project, I'm looking at, can the project actually be constructed? Does it have the infrastructure around it? How much of new infrastructure is required to be built and how much is it going to cost? Can I get my permits and approvals in order to construct that asset? And the third one is, does the investor understand the business model and the risk frameworks that is conducive to those investments? So it's projects like Bristol Springs, which actually ticks all those boxes, that it's something that's tangible, that can be built at a reasonable scale so that you can demonstrate to the public, demonstrate to the investors, demonstrate to the communities, what do we mean when we talk about megawatt and gigawatt? What do we mean about molecule and electron? What do we mean about energy transition and green steel, for example? It's these size of projects that we are embarking on for stage one, and Frontier will grow to those gigawatt scale. We've got the land, we've got the connections, etc., to do it. But it does become a challenge because we can't have government policies focusing towards the mega gigawatt scales of projects, and projects that are real and can take a final investment decision much quicker and enable the industry to progress and mature quicker, get diluted or lost in the discussion, if you like.
Well, I suppose that's things like with the Murchison project. It's really a greenfield site. There's nothing there. There's no transmission line. Everything's got to be built from scratch, sort of thing. And then when you talk about the Townsville hub, yes, there's a group there in Sun Metals that are going to be a takeoff of hydrogen. There's that's a given. But then what doesn't seem to be there is all this renewable energy in the form of renewables there yet. I mean, it's power intensive, and you want to produce hydrogen. You need the electricity to come into you. It's got to be there. And the thing is, although the government's pro renewable energy and sort of minimise some of the environmental standards to get these wind farms and solar farms out there, there is now a considerable pushback by the public in regards to the building of some of these wind farms and that. So it's really with those sort of big projects where you haven't got those things sorted out, you can run into serious trouble in regards to, oh, we're building this plant and all of a sudden we're not getting the wind farms up to deliver the electricity. So that's a problem. And also people are sort of trying to block transmission lines across their property. So unless those things are all in order, you should be a bit more calm about it, I suppose.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Bill. These things has to be carefully planned, and the roadmaps, government has an important role to play in terms of coordinating the energy transition. Undoubtedly, my view is that we have to transition. Energy transition is fundamental. Decarbonization is fundamental. And with decarbonization, there comes significant opportunities for us as, whether it's in the local area, state level, or federal level, countrywide, there's significant opportunity. Coordinating these projects are going to be fundamental. Now, if you go back to 2018-19, when we embarked on our national hydrogen strategy, the first 5 years of that strategy was meant to be trial and pilot scale projects. And during that period, Japan, which is one of our largest importers of energy, of LNG, put out some serious markers or signposts, if you like, that beyond 2030, we're looking at any additional energy to be in the form of renewable energy. Initially, it was blue hydrogen with a transition to green hydrogen, but more recently, they pivoted to green hydrogen. So that provides an enormous opportunity for Australia to provide that renewable hydrogen into those countries. But equally important, what that large amounts of demand does, it gives us a real opportunity to decarbonize our own infrastructure here, decarbonize our own economies, but also build out more opportunity. For example, local manufacturing. Instead of us putting hydrogen on a ship, should we actually manufacture and refine and actually build or manufacture green steel and export green steel? Aluminium, I mean, we are the world's largest, around 45% of refined ore, aluminium, that we process locally and then we ship that overseas. It's quite a significant opportunity. But coming back to your point, it's projects like Bristol Springs that really, really allows the economy to grow, allows the hydrogen industry to build on, because what it does is demonstrates the important role of infrastructure, and it enables us to plan more efficiently. And once you actually start to understand the critical role of this infrastructure, then we understand that what is possible in terms of getting up to that scale and getting the low cost of hydrogen at those scales.
Do you think it's also not helpful when the government's over enthusiastic and looking at, oh, it's going to happen, rather than being focused on the plan and looking at everyone plan and actually have a plan? Because you need basic things like road infrastructure in the regions if you actually want facilities there. If you want to get wind turbines over the Great Australian Divide on some of the current roads and into the outback sort of thing, you've got a bit of a challenge there to get 180, 190 foot long blades on a vehicle and get it out to Hewenden or something like that. And I think some of our local councils have brought up the thing in regards to in central Queensland, where there's a push for renewables to feed these industries. but the road infrastructure and the bridge infrastructure, just for the type of vehicles that would be needed, is somewhat lacking. And they're sort of saying to the federal government, you're pushing this, but where's the bridges and the roads and all that? So do you think the government's probably causing a bit of difficulty with the whole renewables by trying to push it, or not push it along so fast, but sort of tell everyone it's going to happen, and it's going to happen so fast, that rather than sort of in a bit of a mindful and considered way?
Yeah, the role of government cannot be underestimated at all. The role of government is really fundamental to the energy transition, and careful planning with the right signals is very important. But equally important is the public-private partnerships, because to unlock this transition and unlock the opportunities for regional development, whether that's towns, local manufacturing, etc., government has to provide the right political setting. The environment has to be conducive to that private sector investment. And with those private sector investments that's coming in through those signals that government is laying out, that's the opportunity for regional development, in my view. You talk about these wind turbines and those blades, etc. It's amazing to see a blade being transported coming in from Europe, etc. We have the opportunity to manufacture these things locally with our resources, our vastness of our land. We are an extremely smart nation, and with that, we can actually start to manufacture these things locally, providing jobs, high-paying jobs, long, valuable jobs, and the energy transition enables to do that. So in my view, yes, government has a really important role to play, and that coordination and that public-private sector partnership is fundamental to doing that.
Yes, but that's important. But I think in a lot of ways, Australia and our Australian politicians are very lazy in regards to, oh, well, we've got industrial relation laws that sort of hamper us and all that, that it's just, oh, well, we'll just continue to allow to import all this stuff. So if, like I say, we've got the opportunity to even, should be making more steel. We should actually be producing more aluminium than exporting the ore. But it doesn't seem to be a priority of the governments to actually get us into those sort of fields. It's all too hard. And really, we depend on overseas far too much for our supply chain. It would take a massive effort, I think, to get someone to turn around and start building wind turbines in this country. I mean, the thing that amazes me, we don't even make the pylons, and you would think with our steel industry, we would at least be the basic suppliers of the pylons, out of Australia. I mean, the blades are probably a bit more technical requirement, but a steel post is a steel post. Although being an engineer, you might not agree with that, but basically a steel pylon, we should be able to at least produce that here. But there doesn't seem to be, the government doesn't seem to be even focused on at least part participation in the manufacturing, leading to a pathway to full manufacturing facility, and that seems to be a bit of a weak link, I think, at the moment.
And I think there are opportunities for us to really move in that manufacturing opportunity. Certainly assembly lines. I mean, the amount of solar panels required across the country for energy transition. There's millions and hundreds of millions of panels and trackers, etc., that's required, and we have the real opportunity to, at the very least, develop more assembly lines here as we transition and move more into the manufacturing opportunity. Will we see manufacturing in Australia? I think so. I think over the next decade and beyond, we'll see much more manufacturing, but lots more has to be done, Bill. Lots more has to be done in order to unlock that opportunity. If you
But
consider,
one of the things I'm sort of interested in regards to really with Australia, we seem to be fairly good at innovating things and actually sort of inventing things, but very poor at getting them to the commercial stage. It usually has someone to take over. But if I could just touch on one topic at the moment, is electrolyzers and their efficiency, and sort of which will drift into an Australian development. So I'll just put up this screen. We'll see if we can get it ready. Get it up. Okay, I'll share the screen. Can you see that? Current electrolyzer efficiency. The current technology ranges from about 50 or 60% through to 73% efficiency for the different types of electrolyzers. But I noticed an Australian company is developing Hystra is developing a new electrolyzer, which has got a 95% efficiency. They're the sort of advances we really like to see as we go ahead. And it's good to see Australian companies do this. But what do you think the focus is in regards to helping these companies and ensure that they get these products to a commercial situation?
Yeah, firstly, Bill, the HiSATA technology is fantastic technology. It was actually funded by the federal government arena in the initial startup phase. And I believe they've also recently closed out a Series B funding round, raising $40 million. And Arena, again, was one of those federal arms that contributed to that. The technology has a lot of promise. It's capillary-fed electrolysis, and that technology has some very, very promising efficiency gains, if you like. And this is exactly it. The technology is Australian-made, and it has a real opportunity for Australian manufacturing. And it's companies like that we need to get behind. We need to continue, because this is a real opportunity for us to manufacture electrolyzers locally here in Australia.
And hopefully actually protect them from being bought out too soon, before they because that's another thing that seems to happen is someone gets something going off the ground sort of thing, an outside interest, overseas interest comes in, makes an offer too good to refuse, and then we lose it. So maybe when the government sort of invests or gives a grant, there should be maybe protection to ensure that the invention or the commercialization stays within Australia. But that technology, like moving from even 73% to 93% efficiency is a huge gain. The electrolyzers that you're looking at the moment, where do they lie in that efficiency level?
So we have selected alkaline technology, and our efficiency on the alkaline technology is around 80% efficiency. The kilowatt hours I noticed on your screen there, kilowatt hours to kilograms, our technology selected is around the 50 to 51 kilowatt hours of energy to produce a kilogram of hydrogen. The technology that we've selected is alkaline technology because it is the most mature technology on the market. Now, when you consider a company like ours that has commercial contracts attached to it, whilst we always plan for technological advancements, and as our systems come up for replacement or it comes up for expansion, etc., technologies like HiSATA, which we we keep a close eye on, which will be more mature and mainstream in the market, enables us to capitalize on those technologies into our systems. So the technology that we've selected, the alkaline technology, has been around since 1927. There's quite a substantial amount of the market share is dominated by alkaline technology, and it is the cheapest technology on the market at the moment. So these factors combined has led us to select alkaline. But the important point here is our system, as it grows and expands over time, we expect technologies like HASATA, like hydrogen, electric hydrogen, that's also coming out of the US, that has some really good efficiency, those technologies to play a role in our plants. Now, coming back to the efficiency, it's a really good time to compare homegrown technology like HASATA, which is targeting around the 41% efficiency. The 41%, 41 kilowatt hours per kilogram of hydrogen, and that high 90s of efficiency. And when you compare it to technology like hydrogen, electric hydrogen coming out of the US, that's also using PEM technology, but they found some ways of improving the efficiency, very similar to HASATA. Now, imagine if I had to buy technology out of the US and ship it across, the amount of lead time that's required to do that, also for ongoing maintenance, operations, etc. So this is what gives advantage to homegrown technologies like HASATA, but developers like Frontier Energy in Australia. It gives us that peace of mind. It shortens the time frame to actually get the technology delivered. It lowers freight costs, etc. And also technologies like HASATA could be exported. We should be supplying technologies to other countries.
Well, they're the sort of key things I think the government should be looking at in regards to making sure that gets mature. So we've got our foot right in the whole industry across the world. The other thing is a lot of people, it goes for all sorts of electricity generation, with wind farms and things like that, and to hydrogen. A lot of people, hear these big numbers like a megawatt and a gigawatt and things like that. But when we get to hydrogen, a lot of projects say we're producing so much hydrogen, but people also need to understand that amount of hydrogen, if you burn it to produce that much electricity, that's got to go in an hour sort of thing. So there's also a time factor in regards to products like hydrogen. Yes, you can produce 10 gigawatts of power, but you can also, depending where you go to sell it to or use, they can use that 10 gigawatts of power, in a day or 2 days or even less, depending what their application is. So in regards to production, when people say, well, we're going to produce say 100 gigawatts, really the market out there is all these units of hours that you can supply. So your 100 gigawatts, if you ship it out to different places, it's only going to last for so many hours. So that sort of also provide the insight for people in regards to, well, how much more you can produce if everyone's actually using it on a regular basis.
So it's no different to natural gas. So if you consider, most of our power here in the West Coast, certainly most of our power comes from coal. Second is natural gas, and then a small quantity comes from renewable energy. Now, when you think about natural gas, firstly, the natural gas deposits, etc., and then you've got these pipelines, etc., that's moving the gas from point A to point B, and then you've got what we call line pack storage or above ground storage, etc. So it's all about balancing that supply and demand. Now, when you consider hydrogen, hydrogen can do multiple things. It's a very versatile energy vector. It can move cross sectors, so you can burn it. When you burn it, you get just heat and water vapor. That's it. When it's made from renewable energy, it's 100% renewable. You can store it. You can move it across not just across sectors, but across geographies as well. So you can use pipelines, you can use tube trailers, etc. Now, the majority of these technologies at the moment, because of the scale at which we are producing and consuming it, it comes at a high cost. So it's only when you get the demand that's going to drive the investment, and when you get up to these volumes where you can invest in the larger amounts of storage. Now, the way we store hydrogen can be stored in you can liquefy it, you can convert it to ammonia and transport it. You can move it in its gaseous form, you can compress it and line pack it, etc. So there's a significant amount of renewable energy required for the energy transition. But what hydrogen does is, hydrogen, in my view, is not the only answer. It's actually part of the energy mix. And certainly in our energy system, it can provide a vital role in long duration energy storage, flexible power generation, and it can also be fundamentally used in hard to abate sectors. So will all our energy needs come from hydrogen, requiring thousands of gigawatts in scale? Probably not. In terms of the mix, you'll have solar, you'll have wind, you'll have pumped hydro, you'll have geothermal, you'll have batteries, all playing a role in the energy mix, and hydrogen is one of those that will play the mix. What those fundamental or those overarching numbers are, if you had to go completely with hydrogen, those numbers can be quite high, astronomically high.
In the future, with Frontier, at the moment, you're looking at your local project, but do you envisage a stage where you're actually looking to export hydrogen? And in regards to the means of exporting hydrogen, is there a considered best way or whatever, or through conversion to ammonia? Seems to me a reasonably safe option, although ammonia is still fairly corrosive and requires a secondary action at the import country, or
Sure.
compression and getting it down to minus 200 and something degrees centigrade and in very strong steel vessels on board ship.
Sure.
Is
Sure.
there any sort of rule of thumb in regards to what's best for the different scales and the sort of rule of thumb of costs of moving it either of those two ways?
Yeah, ammonia is a very mature way of transporting hydrogen. But for you to actually transport it in the form of ammonia, you have to make it at very, very cheap cost. So if you look at some of the studies out there, some of those cost forecasts, you're going to have it put on a ship at about $2 a kilogram. Now, at $2 a kilogram, that requires significant volume. So you have to be at gigawatt scales and beyond to be able to do that. The second form of transporting hydrogen is to liquefy it. So you can liquefy the hydrogen, but again, that requires, it's energy intensive, and you'd need to actually get up to the scales in order to justify those liquefaction plants, and you'd have to maintain those temperatures at negative 253 degrees Celsius to keep it liquefied. And then at the import terminals, you would, if it's ammonia, you would either consume it in its form with ammonia, power stations can do that, or you'd have to crack it. So you'd crack it on that end, you release the hydrogen, and then you'd use the hydrogen in vehicles or whatever that is. My view is, there's a chemistry engineering question of how to transport it, and you can always develop solutions to do it. Will it be cost effective is the second question. And if we were looking in opportunities for Australia, and you're looking at the majority of those technologies to export energy, we should again come back down to the discussion around manufacturing. Why not? Actually, it's easier for us to ship aluminium, steel products, fuel cell electric vehicles, hydrogen electrolyzers, all manufactured here in Australia, assembled here in Australia, shipped across, and then that way we are shipping our renewable energy in the form of its product.
Produce.
Exactly. So, and this way, it might be more economic for us to do that, more prosperous for us to do that, and it's still a while away before we can start to export hydrogen in the form of.
But still in the secondary industry stage, we have got great opportunities there in regards, even if we get to, instead of just sending iron ore off and bauxite, we at least get it down to that production stage with these technologies. So in actual fact, that is a big saving in regards to the decarbonisation of the world. If we're not sending 100,000 tonne ore carrier off with iron ore, just iron ore, but sending off a 50,000 tonne of rolled steel that's already made, and we must be getting a lot of carbon credit or something from doing that. And I think this is something that's been lost on the government in regards to, well, if we do these things here, we're getting a net saving because we're not having all these ore carriers belching out their fuel and that, carrying iron ore and bauxite across the sea for thousands of kilometres. We've actually got a usable end product, flat steel or ingot or something like that can go straight to a foundry, and they can start working on it.
Well, it's a good point, right? Because if you think about the energy transition and the global push to decarbonize, let's put it another way. If we didn't decarbonize, how would our products, whether it's our raw iron ore or refined or processed iron ore that's manufactured and refined in a fossil fuel intensive process, how would that product compete on a global scale in a decarbonized economy, in a globally decarbonized world? So this is a real, it's one, it's an opportunity, and two, it's a necessity. So it's very important that we consider the energy transition, the role of hydrogen in the energy transition, and the opportunities that it brings for us. Because as a country, we'll be forced to transition as the rest of the world decarbonizes. And we are in a very unique and a great position to be at the forefront of the energy transition and to actually grow our economy by diversifying and bringing local manufacturing here in Australia through these technologies like hydrogen and solar panels and wind and all the renewable energy systems that we'll be developing into.
Well, it's definitely with the EU and the United States, they're pushing this by regulation. So whether you're a climate skeptic or whatever, then doesn't really matter. The regulation is being forced onto the whole world by United States. The EU's leading the way, and whether they're right or wrong, our generations won't know. It'll be something for future generations to find out. But you just can't ignore the actual leverage like the EU has in regards to, well, if you want to do business with us, if you don't do this, you're not going to get our market. And the United States is starting to go the same way. And the other thing is, they're also burdened with the cost as well. It's right, it's being forced on us by the regulation of others, but they're also, their taxpayers and their communities are all caught up with this, and they all have to contribute, pay or up So everyone seems to be in the same basket in regards to dealing with it. It's just a matter of who can make the most of it as we move forward.
Absolutely, Bill. And if you look at the US, with the Inflation Reduction Act that was put in place, that really accelerated many governments, jurisdictions around the world in terms of their own strategies and policies, etc. Last week, $4 billion in the budget was announced for renewable energy, $2 billion set aside for subsidies to really kickstart this industry and to get the transition running. My view is, that's just a head start. It's just a start. And as part of the budget, there was a $14 million announced as well to support local manufacturing. So right sort of signals, but much more is required. Much more is required. Much more to come. So it's been fantastic chatting to you. I'll need to wrap up soon.
Okay, then no worries. I suppose one of the big things, buddy, is there's a lot of costs being forced onto the public, so that's something we've got to deal with. In regards to Bristol Springs, what are you looking for as far as maturity dates and target dates?
Sure. So Bill, we've completed all of our engineering to a really high standard. This week, we announced a landmark collaboration agreement with the Dampier to Bunbury pipeline operator. Just today, we announced net zero accreditation from the Smart Energy Council. So our facility is certified zero carbon, which is a major milestone. We are one of 3 projects in the country that has this certification. And we are heavily involved in offtake negotiations at the moment, and that's where we are focusing. All things being equal, by the end of this year, we take a final investment decision. We start construction next year, and by the end of 2025, early 2026, we can have first hydrogen produced at these larger scales.
Okay. I suppose the other thing is, I hope these other companies and that are on these more grandiose things at least has a look at your model and maybe does a bit of rejigging in regards to maybe just toning down the enthusiasm a little bit and say, well, there's a lot of miles to go, there's a lot of hard work to put in, and there's a lot of other factors that have got to come into it, rather than sort of just saying we're doing this sort of thing. So look,
wonderful. Thank you, Bill.
Look, I thank you for your time. It's been really appreciated. When you get to for the next stage or whatever, or next milestone, it'd be nice to have another chat. But look, thank you very much for your time tonight. If you just stay on there I'll just introduce next week's show, and we'll head off from there.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you very much, Sam. If you enjoyed tonight's show, please like, share, and subscribe to our Facebook page, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Next week, I'll have Torrin O'Brien on the show. Now, he's been instrumental in some of the protests in Rockhampton in regards to the juvenile justice problem we've got. So join me again then. Thank you.